Simone! Today we are going to be diving into something that one of our fans sent us, and as I read about this, I was mortified. It appears that toxoplasmosis, remember that thing that everybody knows about from pop culture, where it's something that you can catch from cats, and it sort of disorients mice and changes their behavior and makes them more likely to be caught and eaten by cats, thus spreading the cycle of infection, and people are aware it can spread to humans and slightly change human behavior. Well, there was a study done, Toxoplasmosis gondii, a detailed description of the condition, asexual and sexual development, and oocyst sporulation, that showed that actually there are a number of variations of this that begin to specialize at targeting specific species. Not only that, but this paper then goes over other parasites and diseases that may be modifying human sexual behavior so that they can spread more aggressively, with a lot of receipts.
In other words, the diseases are in the driver's seat of our brains. They are
some people's brains.
If you've been
So
infected,
did you know that with toxoplasmosis, before we go into it, it's already been shown to make males that are infected with it taller and thus more attractive to women, and that it can transfer from male to male and male to female, but not female to male.
That's right, because it's transferred through sperm. So.
Yes. So no, but this is wild to me that it is literally creating extra attractive males, modifying what arouses them to be more likely to be into gay stuff. So that
and BDSM in general, just like racy stuff.
Well, the type of stuff that would involve the types of contact that would spread a disease. But it's not just that. Did you know that the one of the things we're going to be going over is the HPV virus? You know, the one that you can get from eating girls out? Did you know that it makes you more interested in eating girls out or wanting to be eaten out? So when you have HPV, you want guys to eat you out more? I got in this section wrong from memory. It's actually yeast infections that cause this. So we're going to go over...
Oh, that's interesting.
On to new business. Today's mission is for you all to go to the
orgy
planet.
What are we going to do there?
Just
go down on each other.
Not wearing a
condom.
Sounds great, Hermes. Whatever you say. Let's ditch him and go to the movies. Hey, yeah!
To spill it out here, this is probably one of the most impactful episodes I have ever recorded because it reveals, in pretty much no uncertain terms and with a lot of receipts, that the urban monoculture is co-evolving with a number of pathogens and parasites that alter people's brains in the way that they perceive reality. In the same way that they accuse us of being hosts because we are hosts to the next generation of humanity, it implies strongly that they and many of their leaders are literally just hosts to parasites that are altering their perception of reality, which explains some of their beliefs that can seem very, very strange for a rational thinking human to hold.
Open the door. It is so much better. There's no fear or pain. It's beautiful. And you will be beautiful. No problems or worries. We want you. No pain, Stan? Come in here and I'll show you some pain!
My generation was the first, our generation was the first to get vaccinated against it. I'm vaccinated against it. You know, the funny thing is, it was, you know, sold to me, of course, as like a completely sexless teen. And I was so enthusiastic about getting it, even though I like basically planned on living a virgin my entire life. But I was still like, I'm so excited to get this vaccine. I just wanted to collect vaccines. Got to catch them all. But I wonder, like, if the opposite of it may have contributed to my aversion to it, or if the default is aversion to it, and then if maybe just getting infected with it is the thing that makes this so pervasive now.
She hates the idea of somebody eating her out, which works fine for me. No, but actually, this is really interesting. So one of the things we're going to get to at the end of this piece is sort of a hypothesis on why these, one, and this isn't talked about in the piece, but it's something that we need to talk about because it's very germane to our audience. Why, when the science is beginning to show that this stuff is very likely happening, that some of the degenerate behavior we're seeing in our society is literally humans being modified by diseases to have unique and differentiated arousal patterns.
Mm.
Why aren't you being told about this? And the answer is fairly obvious. It would be mortified if you could say, which is one of the things we're going to talk about, is same-sex attraction may be in part modified by a bacteria or another form of disease. It may be mortifying to tell somebody that part of your kink profile is actually just the fact that you had a disease at a young age or even recently.
If memory serves too, the research found that some of the effects of being infected with toxoplasmosis amplified over time. So the longer you were infected, the worse your reaction times, which is one of the reasons why
this gets to the thing where somebody can be like, oh, online porn screwed up my brain. It made me into like really extreme things. And I've pointed that the research shows this isn't actually the case, that online porn does not seem to amplify the weirdness of the things you're aroused by. It's just that you become better at finding the stuff that you're interested in. But that it may be the case that what these people actually have and do not realize is a disease that is amplifying the things that they are aroused by.
Right. Like if that can be the case with toxoplasmosis and reaction times, and why is it not the case with, these other things?
And then we've got to start asking as a society, are orgies a bad idea? Is the way that we are treating sexuality more broadly in our society a bad idea? Was it actually good to have prohibitions against non-vaginal sex?
Well, also, this changes the way that I think we're going to talk with our kids about STDs, because it's one thing to be like, oh, you got crabs. Like I remember that Sex and the City episode, and it's just like, oh, now you just get some antibiotics and it sucks or whatever. But now it's like, no, actually, this might change your identity, your behavior.
Yeah, in our generation, we were all terrified of AIDS, right? And now people aren't afraid of AIDS anymore. People with AIDS are just like, oh, I'm on PrEP, whatever, right? But by the way, that's one of the diseases that also changes behavior.
PrEP is if you want to avoid AIDS, isn't it? You're on something else if you actually have
No, PrEP is if you have, look, it doesn't matter. The point is now people feel that AIDS isn't a risk because PrEP exists. But the point being is that see our episode on PrEP, it's really effed up. Like the government pays for it. And the only thing it's really useful for is people who want to have a lot of sex with non-monogamous partners. It's weird. But the point here being is even AIDS seems to affect behavior to help it spread. So we're going to go over this. We're going to go over the research of it. But to me as a kid, this would be even more terrifying than AIDS. It's like you sleep around and a virus is going to rewrite your brain to turn you into like a degenerate, and an idiot, and it will control your personality. How fun was that?
Yeah, because just to be clear, it doesn't just make men taller and give them behaviors that make them more attractive. It also affects reaction time. So there's a higher proportion of people who die in traffic accidents if they have toxoplasmosis. And like I mentioned earlier, the reaction time gets worse over time. So, I mean, you don't want, like, from a safety standpoint, that's not a good thing.
I'm skipping a bit into the article to start here. Humans can get infected between 13 and 43% of adults 25 years to 50 years of age in Europe, with lower rates in North America and higher ones in Brazil and Africa. Freischmann et al. 2025. Some strains, so note, if you're talking in Europe, it's around 43% of people are infected at this point.
Basically half. Like you should expect that you're going to get infected if you're
having promiscuous sex, yes. Yeah. And in the United States, the rates are lower though. So
but basically if you're having promiscuous sex as a woman, because
but not as a man. I actually got this wrong when I first read this. The rates in men are much higher than women, even though men can't get it from women, because bisexuals and gays have so much more promiscuous sex than straight women or men do. So you're actually more at risk of a man, but only if you are sleeping with other men. So we'll get to that in a second. Some strains seem to have adapted specifically to human hosts. One of the three lineages, type 2 strains, are the most common in our species. They're also much less lethal than type 1, perhaps because they have co-evolved with humans to a greater extent. Delago et al. 2020, Hassani et al. 2019, Quixon and Yolkin 2015. You know what? Actually, you can just go to where this paper is if you want to see all the studies on it. Peter Frost did this piece on his Substack. It's called "Are Tiny Parasites Messing with Our Brains? Think Before You Swallow."
I mean, surely you're being exposed even if you don't
No, the
swallow.
point I'm making here, and the point that he's making here, is one of the lineages is behaving as if it's adapted to humans already. To be less lethal to a species typically means you are better adapted to spread within that species. That's what happens. Diseases don't want to kill you. That's typically a very bad thing, and only really happens right after a disease has made the jump from one species to another species. That's why things like COVID, or what was the pig flu, or the bird flu, or the
Swine flu,
whatever, it's because they just made a jump from one species to another species, so they haven't adjusted to be less lethal.
sorry.
Okay. Infectious causes mental and behavioral changes to humans as with other animals. Men become more jealous, women more easygoing, and both sexes respond to threats, as shown by a high risk of traffic accidents and longer reaction time. Show less risks to threats. So that's interesting. It basically makes men into terrible polyamorous partners and women more likely to be okay with their partner sleeping around.
Yeah, I mean that would work.
That would help spread the disease. Yeah.
That would do it.
The last finding proves the direction of causality. The longer you have been infected, the lower you react. Slower reaction time does not increase your risk of infection. So it's not that these people are less prone to risk that makes them more likely. It's the longer you infect, the worse this outcome gets. And it might be the case with these other pathogens we're going to talk about. And there's four studies.
It makes sense. Isn't it like brain lesions that's causing this? So also you're sort of like ossifying
it changes based on the infection type.
Oh, okay.
So some things use brain lesions, some things use blood restriction, some things use fake neurotransistors. It's different. Okay. Anyway, at the extremes of sexual behavior, infected individuals, particularly men, feel more drawn to masochism, great fantasies, bondage, same-sex experiences, and anal. Women with a latent toxoplasmosis also report feeling more drawn to violent sexual practices and same-sex experiences, but such fantasies are, if anything, less often acted out by infected individuals. Real changes to sexual behavior seem confined to a greater propensity for sexual promiscuity, oral sex, and among male homosexuals, anal sex. And there's 5 studies that show this, by the way. This is not like fringe science here, okay?
Yeah.
And again, you can go to the original Substack if you want to find links to all these. You guys don't want to hear me struggling to pronounce a bunch of names that matters to the one nerd who feels the need to fact check everything. T. gondii manipulates not only behavior, but also physical appearance. Infected men are taller, and women rate them as being more dominant and masculine looking. Infected men also have lower second to fourth digit ratios, a sign of greater exposure to male hormones. And there are 4 studies that show this. The physical manipulation is in line with a strategy of making infected males more attractive to prospective hosts study. Can this behavioral and physical manipulation be demonstrated under controlled conditions? Such research would be difficult because we cannot experiment with humans as we do as lab animals. Humans also live long. Decades may pass between the initial infection and the ultimate payoff by the parasite. 2 studies showing this. Nonetheless, a group of Czech researchers is convinced that some strains of T. gondii have evolved the ability to manipulate human behavior, specifically sex. Infected men not only seek out more sexual partners, but also engage in sexual practices that transmit the parasite more efficiently, i.e. into the partner's oral cavity or anal canal. The existing host gets no reproductive benefit. In fact, his fertility is reduced through lower sperm counts and lower sperm motility.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, you'd be like, oh, well, no.
Well, also, he's going to go on here and show that this may explain cucking behavior and other behavior that doesn't seem to make sense. And a preference for oral sex, which also does not really help you reproduce.
That's
right?
true.
So
yeah.
Why do some people have oral preference? This may explain it. We're not supposed to talk about this. But isn't it kind of crazy that like a portion of society, particularly like the urban monoculture sex pest, may just be basically a disease behind the control, like driving human, like, the little mouse inside the human, arguing for its own benefit. When I see people, like there was recently, and we might do a full episode on this, an individual like the trans woman who runs Philosophy Tube, like giving this long, really poorly thought through, like she seems to get dumber every year, thought through of why pronatalism doesn't make sense and we don't need to worry about this. I'm like, but you're like a manifestation of a human Darwin award. Like you're not part of human civilization anymore. You are not, you know, you don't have any descendants to care about. Like, it doesn't matter to you that your advice is so bad and will have such long-term negative ramifications for humanity. But it might be that when I was trying to model her behavior, I shouldn't be modeling her behavior, but the parasites that are driving it. And that is wild that I've realized, like, oh my God, that changes the way I have to attempt to model ultra urban monoculture people.
Well, you've always referred to the urban monocultures being akin to being infected with, well, a mimetic virus, right? But now it's like, oh wait, they're actual viruses.
No, but here's the thing. If the virus increased the spread of the urban monoculture would adopt practices that increase the spread of the virus, because it would be a symbiotic cycle. So we might actually have some of these viruses or parasites that are working with the urban monoculture to genuinely turn the people infected into puppets. And as you walk around society and you say, oh my God, the people I'm interacting with seem more and more like puppets every day, they might be. T. gondii cyst in mouse brain. We know that T. gondii is present in male ejaculate as cysts containing thousands of spores. There is a study here. We also know that cysts spread from one body to another through fellatio, anal sex, and vaginal sex. The transmission rates in male to female or male to male, but not male to male. And 2 studies show this, as I mentioned earlier. Sexual transmission, particularly from the male host, is indicated by several lines of evidence. In heterosexual couples, an infected male partner increases the female partner's risk of infection, but an infected female partner does not increase the male partner's risk of infection. In women, the risk of infection correlates with sex work, unprotected sex before pregnancy, and a history of genital injuries. In men, it correlates with sexual promiscuity, and in male homosexuals with unprotected anal sex. Severe prevalence of T. gondii is higher in fellating individuals of either sex than in non-fellating controls. Several prevalence is higher in, I don't like that he uses homosexuals, that's a sort of outdated word, male gays and promiscuous individuals. Several prevalence is positively correlated with prevalence of STDs across countries, including HIV. Several prevalence is, oh, interesting, that would explain why it's higher in Africa and potentially why it's higher in Europe, although I think it might just be sort of covariant with the urban monoculture or sort of symbiotic, and we might be seeing this. You know, it makes people less prone to threats, so they don't understand, oh my God, bringing all these people who keep raping people in my country might not be a good idea. It makes it so that you cannot see the threats around you, right? The gender difference emerges in the 10 to 14 age group and peaks among 20 to 39-year-olds. 3 studies show this. I'm going to explain why that's important right now. Here is again where I made the mistake that I assumed, because it can only transfer from men to other genders or to other men, either men or women, that it would be more prevalent in women. But no, actually the gender imbalance is that it is more prevalent in men than women, because even though there are fewer gays and bisexuals, they just have that much more sex and that much more of the type of sex that can lead to transfer. It doesn't become more prevalent in women until you hit about 14 years of age, i.e. until when some people begin to become more sexually active, especially sexually promiscuous people. So to continue here, T. gondii seems to have become sexually transmissible through 3 stages of coevolution with our species. Entry into a human population. Apparently via contact with cats, this animal began to coexist with humans some 10,000 years ago in the Middle East. Study. Passive sexual transmission. T. gondii could now spread to new human hosts via intimate contact, including sex, but without any behavioral modification of the host. Natural selection thus favored adaptation to life within human bodies, even though the final stage of the parasite's life cycle, sexual reproduction, remained within cat bodies. Nonetheless, T. gondii could evolve through mutations during asexual reproduction and therefore parasexual recombination-like events. It's study. Active sexual transmission. Natural selection increasingly favored sexual transmission by modifying the host behavior. Again, this evolution may have been speeded up by genetic recombination within cat bodies via transmission from human to cats back again. And I'll note here, while this entered human populations 10,000 years ago, I do not think it evolving a specialty for spreading within human populations really began to have significant benefits for spread or have an evolutionary reason for for it until about the last 40 years, because promiscuous sex was just not that common before then. So it wouldn't have been an effective transmission vehicle, nor was male to male sex or bisexual males, which seems to be, or at least a normalization of this behavior, which seems to be of high utility to getting this to spread. You can see why the urban monoculture is not talking about all of these studies. We are only now realizing that T. gondii is sexually transmitted. For many, if not most academics, the dominant view is that T. gondii is transmitted mainly through contaminant food or water through contact with cats.
Yeah.
From this perspective, sexual transmission by male hosts is seen as of minor importance. Yet, look at the huge gender differentiation. We basically know it's definitely in part gender transmitted now.
Well, and if 45% of people in Europe are infected in it, I mean, the pervasive understanding when we were younger, even in our young adulthood, was like, well, if you have cats, just use a respirator when you change their litter in the litter box and you'll be fine. But no, it's not a litter box problem.
No, yeah. So it's also not just that. The fact that the study showed, as I pointed out, that men who are dating or married to a woman with this have no higher rate of having it, but women who are dating or married to a man with it have a much higher rate of having it. Is basically, to me, all the proof I need. That people who practice fellatio have a much higher rate of it than people who don't practice fellatio.
Well, but also, if you're having any form of ejaculative intimacy with a man as a woman, you're going to get it.
Yeah, well, gays do have a significantly higher rate of it if they have unprotected sex.
Yeah, but that's, again, ejaculative intimacy.
Yeah, but I'm basically saying that we have confirmation of this. This isn't like some weird theory at this point.
Yeah.
We know it's being sexually transmitted, and it has adapted to this as one of the primary means of its transmission. Yet it is sufficiently common to distort the sex ratio among infected individuals, apparently through male-to-male transmission. In Italy, quote, the prevalence of recent infection was higher in men than in women. A twofold attack rate was detected in males compared to females in the ages of 25 to 35 years. In Germany, male gender, keeping cats, and BMI were independent risk factors for seropositivity. Study here. So
seropositivity. So
wait, Simone, this is actually really important. This means in Germany, having cats is not relevant to your probability of catching this. That is how much it has adapted to a sexual transmission lifestyle.
That's crazy. Yeah.
In the United States, risk for IgG seropositivity, that's gondii, increased with age and was higher in males, Jones et al. In the case of workers occupationally exposed to animals, in meta-analysis of 66 studies, found a prevalence of 63% among male workers and 37% among female workers.
Yeah, well, I also want to point out, because he points this out in the piece, and I think it's notable just in terms of how impressive this spread is Toxoplasmosis does not reproduce in humans. It can only reproduce in cats. So the way it uses humans is basically a means of getting to the next cat. And it can go from human to human. So it can go from human to human. It can travel along, but it can't reproduce.
Actually, I think you misunderstood what he was saying.
Really?
I'm not going to read the section where he explains this again, but he explains that it has various parts of its reproductive cycle. It can't complete its normal reproductive cycle if it's only using human hosts, but if it's doing some of the types of asexual reproduction it does, it can reproduce only in human hosts. And you could get a human-only specialist variant of it.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch.
Even though the final stage of the parasite's life cycle, sexual reproduction, remained within cat bodies. Nonetheless, T. gondii could evolve through mutations during asexual reproduction and therefore parasexual recombination-like events. And we might have already seen that.
Oh, so it's not certain. It may have been.
It's not certain that it is human only in its reproductive cycle now, but there might be variants of it that are almost human only in their reproductive cycle, and very only rarely use cats at this point.
Okay.
This is something you find in some species where you can have asexual reproduction in some environments, but sexual reproduction requires other environments. You don't need to go into that. Nonetheless, sexual transmission of T. gondii will likely continue to be downplayed. This is largely due to a research bias towards obvious STDs, i.e. those which produce symptoms soon after infection and are easily observable and develop over a short time. But these characteristics are not optimal for infection of a long-lived species like ours. In such species, harming the host reduces the prospects of infection of new hosts over a potentially long time. Basically, I just think he's wrong here about what he's saying here. He says the reason we aren't studying it is because it's not more loud sort of in its effects over a short period of time. I think it's because it would be incredibly damaging to the urban monoculture and many protected groups if you could be like, hey, you don't have a sexuality, you have a disease or a parasite that is controlling you and attempting to use your behavior to affect me or my children or, you know, the still unaffected members of society. We're literally going up. What are we going down here? Some sort of like slutty zombie virus?
Yeah.
It is actually like, okay, there's
But I
a
mean,
thing.
come on, classic trope. It's this slutty monster. So good.
No. There's actually like a trope. One of the scenarios that I often see near the tops of AI chatbot sites, which we have, it is getting better. We're getting closer to having a really solid one, but it's been really up and down for a while here, rfab.ai, but I don't know if we have one on our platform. You can make one if you want, but it's on a lot of the other platforms. Is there's a disease that's going around that turns people into like very sexually aggressive, like, and that's all they can think about. And it's a version of a zombie apocalypse that apparently some people like get off to. And that's what's actually happening in our society right now when you're dealing with these very aggressive sex pets. Okay, are other parasites messing with our sex lives? T. gondii might be one of many microorganisms that have evolved to manipulate human behavior. So I'm going to skip a bit here. Let's go to HIV, right? HIV-associated neurocognitive disorders called HAND. Although HIV-associated neurocognitive disorders, HAND, are widely attributed to HIV, and the relationship between the two remains circumstantial, in fact, HAND occurs even in individuals who have lost all detectable traces of HIV through antiretroviral therapy. So even if you're on PrEP, you're going to have these brain changes.
Wow.
One study found that 21% of such individuals nonetheless go on to develop dementia. I didn't know that study. The causal agent seems to exist as an AIDS cofactor, not by making an HIV infection worse, but by increasing the host's appetite for behaviors that increase the risk of HIV infection. This cofactor may be hiding in plain sight among opportunistic infections currently blamed for the host's compromised immune system. While such infections primarily target the lungs, the brain is the second most common target. And then he cites two studies here. The existence of brain manipulating cofactor is consistent with the profile of AIDS victims study in Bologna, Italy. In that country, AIDS is transmitted mainly via intravenous drug use, yet transmission via gays and bisexuality is 10 times more associated with cognitive impairment. Oh, interesting. Two studies. This might be a different, so just so you can understand what he's saying here, is there maybe a different strain of it that is specialized at transmitting via gays and bisexuals that it is altering sexual behavior? Certainly, AIDS does impair cognition, as shown by the association between low white cell counts and HAND in the Bologna study, but some cofactor may also be impairing cognition via the gay bisexuality route. The cofactor might be hepatitis C virus, oh, he's arguing it's a different thing. He's arguing it's using other diseases to impact your brain. Weird. Anyway, HCV, in a large cohort of people with HIV, the risk of HAND was higher among those with antibodies to HCV, and then he gives a study here. I'd argue that it might be that there's just different strains that are specializing in drug users versus gays. By the way, people will say that you cannot get diseases that evolve this quickly in human populations due to our long lifespans, which is just factually wrong. There's been many species that have specialized in humans. We literally just watched COVID adapt itself through multiple iterations only over a period of a few years to human hosts. That is why it is so much less virulent and deadly now than it used to be, because it has adapted itself to human hosts. Anyone who says you a disease cannot quickly adapt its behavior to human hosts is lying to you. When they say, oh, well, it can't adapt itself to affect human brains because human brains are so complex, it's like, no, there are lots of complex things that you can affect through fairly simple actions. Suppose I wanted to affect the behavior of a computer, right? And I only had a fairly simple action. I could throw sand into one of the components, right? There are a number of components within a computer that I could throw sand into and very confidently affect its behavior in specific ways. The idea that you can't affect the human brain by basically throwing sand in different parts of it. And keep in mind, it's not even that bad. It can just create neurotransmitter analogs, which we've already seen from some of these parasites. It can create lesions, which we have already measured from this. Like, I don't understand how you could argue that unless you're just desperate to say, no one in society is the puppet of a parasite.
I mean,
okay, Let's talk about sexually transmissible strains of Candy ablacus. This is a vaginal yeast. Candy
yeast infections.
This might have been what I was thinking instead of HPV.
Just yeast infections. Yeah.
Candy has been implicated in Candy has been implicated in several neurodegenerative diseases, notably Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, and autism spectrum disorders.
Yikes.
It thus evolves the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and adhere to tissue in the central nervous system, particularly white matter. Because of antibody cross-reactivity, the actual Candy species is difficult to identify, though. C. ablacanus is the main suspect. 2 studies here. Now, note here, what he's pointing out here is we know that it can cross the blood-brain barrier and interact with your brain. Okay, that's not an easy thing for something like this to do, and it evolved that. Why did it evolve this ability? Well, it must have wanted to mess with your behavior in some way. So he says
it's neurodegenerative.
Well, we know it has that behavior, but that's probably a side effect of the throwing the sand in the machinery.
I'm just thinking about, there was this trend at one point where women were using their vaginal yeast in recipes. So trying not to vomit while also wondering if there was some kind of neurodegenerative thing going on.
Well, Simone, these women already had the neurodegenerative effects. It makes sense when you think about what they were doing.
Yeah.
All right. Keep in mind that C. ablacanus encompasses many strains that differ substantially from each other in various ways. Single nucleotide polymorphisms, inversions, copy number changes, loss of heterozygosity, and the whole or partial chromosomal aneuploidies. At least one of these changes is responsible for altering the balance between communalism and parthenogenesis. And then he has 2 studies here. C. ablacanus can colonize many body sites, but some strains have adapted specifically to the vagina. A few are responsible for vulva vagina candidiasis, VVC, commonly known as vaginal yeast infection, which affects 70% to 75% of sexually active women and at least 5 to 8% recurrently. And then he gives a study here. In China, 2 strains account for almost 60% of all VVC cases, with neither being present in extravaginal sites. He has a study here. Sexual transmission is indicated by several lines of evidence. Once vaginal infection develops, it can spread to male partners' glands or penis via vaginal sex, or to his oral cavity via cunnilingus. 2 studies here. The same strains seem to infect both the vagina and the glans penis. 2 studies here. In both men and women, genital yeast infections are associated with higher number of sexual partners. Study here. There seems to have been selection for sexually transmissible, particularly via oral sex. Vaginal strains adhere better than other strains to saliva-coated surfaces. 1 study here.
Should we just tell our boys to not go down on women?
That's what I would tell them. Yeah.
Just don't do it. Don't do it. No.
Tell our daughters, don't get into that. It's bad. You're going to become a transmission of diseases. Anyway, transmission in women to man and not man to woman. Sorry, transmission is from woman to man and not from man to woman. Infected people do not have a higher rate of vaginal sex, but they do have a higher rate of oral sex, notably cunnilingus. 2 studies. So women who get this have a higher rate of wanting cunnilingus. Isn't that wild?
You know what I'm also thinking, though, which I think is interesting here, is I feel like romantasy books are more popular among progressives, right?
Yeah.
They all are also pretty devoid of, we'll say, normal reproductive sex and riddled with cunnilingus.
That is true.
Could this be a sign of selective disease spread within this particular group, where they're quite obsessed and fixated on men going down on them? Because it really shows up disproportionately in these books, to the point where
you were never sexually promiscuous and you've always hated the idea.
Yeah. And I find it interesting, because I also find it very perplexing when there's supposed to be romance novels, and one would assume that there would be sex in romance novels, and there's, beyond men going down on women, not any. And that just has really confused me.
Fascinating theory. Here, I want to give you another theory.
Okay.
After a woman has been cooked, one of these women goes out there, spends her whole life sleeping around, dedicates their life to the urban monoculture, then they get old, they don't find a partner, then they surround themselves with cats to complete the breeding cycle. This is not
mission accomplished.
What cats more, but for making them undesirable.
Childless cat lady
which
disease.
leads to the behavior of acquiring tons of cats that cat ladies are literally just breeding sites of toxoplasmosis after it cooks their brain.
Right. So women went from being tools of the patriarchy to tools of the
parasite.
The feline-archy. Not even that. Not even the cats, but the parasites of the cats. That the lowest of the low.
When you talk to these people, you'd be like, I don't have to listen to a host. Like your host-like mindset is getting to me right now.
They've traded the patriarchy, which is built civilization, for a cat parasite.
A cat parasite to help breed a cat parasite.
Oh my god, that's crazy. That's wild.
No. We need to start calling cat ladies the hosts.
No.
You cannot allow the host to breathe. Like when they come near you, you've got to like hide your face a bit.
Yes.
All right. C. applicandus in the male partner's oral cavity does not predict recurrence of VVC in female partners study, and treatment of the male partner with antifungals does not prevent reoccurrence of VVC in the female partners. 2 studies. It looks as if the parasite is acting on the female partner, specifically on her sexual behavior, by weakening her inhibitions and motivating her to encourage in vaginal contact with the male partner's body, particularly his mouth. Infection seems to proceed in 3 stages. 1, colonization of the vagina as commensal with low virulence and no VVC, potentially for long period of relative latency. 2, colonization of the brain sites that influence sexual behavior. And 3, activation of the most virulent stage, i.e. VVC, when the pathogen can now spread to the male partner. And keep in mind, the end state of this is, Alzheimer's, various forms of neurodegenerative disease. I think it's Parkinson's. Like, it's not good. You're cooking your brain. It's cooking your brain because it doesn't care about you living forever. I mean, when you're an old person and you're only having sex with other people who are about to die, you've gone out of its life cycle. Its life cycle is use you for sleeping around when you're young, use you for cats when you're middle age. It's like this collection of diseases, and then dispose of you. All right, let's get to multiple sclerosis here.
Oh no.
This disease can cause lesions throughout the nervous system, but a recurring symptom is an impairment of social cognition through damage of the limbic system, particularly the amygdala. 4 studies here. As we have seen with T. gondii, this brain region is primary target of manipulation of behavior. Multiple sclerosis, MS, appears to be associated with a fungal parasite that infiltrates the brain and nervous system, perhaps a form of condii. In people with MS, the association is indicated by antibodies against Candida species. So I didn't know this, by the way. So if you have MS, you're going to have higher levels of antibodies against the Candida species, high levels of immune defense proteins that bind to mannaproteins, which are ubiquitous in fungal cell walls, but rare in bacterial or mammalian cell walls, high levels of chistidase, which the immune system produces to destroy chitin, a component of fungal cell walls, but not of bacterial or mammal cell walls, successful treatment of MS with fungicide, dimethrin, formiminate. This is one study that showed this. MS seems to be sexually transmitted. It is rare before puberty, but 2 to 3 times more common in women, more commonly in women taking oral contraceptives, and associated with smoking, a sociological marker of sexual activity in women. By the way, you know what my mom used to say about women who smoke?
If women smoke, they're also more likely to be sexually active?
Do you know what my mom used to say about women who smoked?
No, actually.
All the time when I was growing up, when she was like, if you want to hit on women, always remember, if she smokes, she pokes.
She just had the best.
Basically,
lines.
I love it. We're just going over all my mom's offensive. Now that she's not alive anymore and doesn't watch the podcast every day, she doesn't know that I'm now telling you all of her secret wisdoms, which turned out to be largely true. Like, lesbians.
We're quoting her in our house every day.
Bisexual men are real. If she smokes, she pokes.
What did she also say about girls and second dates, though? Yeah.
Oh, she said if a woman has not slept with you or gone down on you by the 3rd date, she's playing around, dump her. And I will note, this is actually kind of true, even if you're the type who's likely going to get married to somebody, unless you're within a community where almost nobody sleeps around. Because like Simone, you had slept with me by, what was it, date 4?
No. I have it in our calendar. It was Yuri's night when we...
Yeah, but it wasn't that long into our dating. Even though I was the first person you slept with, it was still only like week 2 of dating or week 3 of dating.
No. It was... I can check the dates if you want.
Well, that doesn't help much because we lived literally 2.5 hours apart. So we
I
didn't
know
see
it was yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult. But yeah, no, I mean, like I was ready to. I mean, like I was on a mission. I'd fall in love and have my heart broken in 1 year. It's not like I was waiting. So.
But the point being is she didn't have these opinions because she was very conservative. I'll note that she was like very like pro-gay, for example.
Yeah.
Because she had a friend who was gay who died of AIDS when she was young, you know, back when that was a thing. So she was part of like that generation of pro-gay culture.
Your mom.
Yeah, my mom. Yeah. By the way, speaking of, I have seen this comedian and he made this point that I had never thought of before. And I want to move to this, which is to say, when people are like, oh, are you only pro-LGB and not T? I'm like, no, I'm just pro-gay. Okay.
That's true.
Look, lesbians are just gays. If you sleep with the same sex, sometimes you're just gay.
You're
like
gay.
Bisexual is just a subcategory of gay. Can we just go back to being defending gay rights instead of all this other nonsense? But even that, I now have to question, given all of these, because I didn't know that there was any like really negative effects. If we're getting species, and if this is happening, if we're getting species that recently have adopted to use same-sex attracted populations as part of their life cycle and are altering human behavior in a way that's maladaptive, this might mean that I would be significantly stricter with my kids. And I will be, because of this information, about saying you really probably shouldn't engage in same-sex behavior, even if that's something that you're into.
I don't know. Sort of like I feel very conflicted about. I mean, gay figures throughout history have contributed quite a lot to culture, to religion, to fashion.
Agree with that, but the larger thing is in history when they did this, it was still considered a kink. It wasn't considered part of their identity. It was considered not.
I mean, these days, and we still have great gay contributors to society.
Right. The point I'm making is if you consider being gay just another kink that you should probably not engage with, but some people will.
Oh.
So if you go back to these periods where you have these great gay contributions, you know, if you're talking about like the late medieval period or something like that, or Renaissance period, you know, being gay was considered like having a fart fetish or like, you know, wanting to be whipped or something like that, right? Like it was considered like a weird thing that you certainly wouldn't consider part of your identity, and you probably shouldn't make like a full-time thing.
Not your identity. And now it's like, oh, like.
But the point I'm making here is if we are now getting iterations of parasites that are adapted to spread within humans in ways that they weren't before, like one of the things that I've said is when people can be like, oh, you know, would you tell your kid to not engage in same-sex behavior during the AIDS epidemic? Like I 100% would have. I don't care that they're same-sex attractive. It could lead to their death. You know, I'd be like, you know, maybe exercising a degree of restraint is more important than dying of AIDS, right? Like the environmental context that we're in, there are things that are more important in life than engaging in whatever arouses you.
But I mean, it's for the way we're going to be talking with our kids about it. It's not even really about gay stuff as much as like basically any non-reproductive sex is a sin anyway. Like just focusing on pleasure at all is something we're not going to encourage. So it's hardly like we're like, oh, watch out for the gay stuff. I mean, anyone who's having sex for fun, period, we're like, I don't know, man.
We haven't even gotten priorities stuff yet. So let's finish multiple sclerosis here.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
It is also associated with herpes simplex virus 2. 2 studies. No, they were talking here about the multiple sclerosis. Unlike the unknown parasite that may cause hand, this one begins doing harm early in adulthood at around 30 years of age, perhaps because this is when female hosts tend to abandon the multi-partner lifestyle. Consequently, the parasite no longer has anything to gain from keeping the host healthy. The mean age of onset for MS has nonetheless risen in recent decades, 2 studies. So this could be the case of women staying promiscuous for longer. So basically, the disease that leads to multiple sclerosis basically has an evolutionary pressure to try to keep away the really damaging stuff it's doing to your brain until after you've left this promiscuous phase of your life.
Yeah, once you're no longer useful to it.
It's like, whatever, I can just screw up the rest of your brain at this point, but it's otherwise modifying behavior before this. Okay.
Well, then you just got to keep slutting it up.
Now we're going to get really offensive. Exclusive male gayness. More than 2 decades ago, Greg Cochran argued for the existence of a quote unquote gay germ, i.e., a pathogen that reorients male sexual preference to increase the number of hosts it can infect via sexual relations. Study here. He ruled out genetic causes because of the high fitness cost of exclusive male gayness and its heritability of only 20%. Instead, the cause may be a pathogen that targets the limbic system. Quote, indeed, anecdotal reports indicate that changes in human sexual orientation have occurred following changes in limbic area due to trauma or infection, end quote. The pathogen may be exploiting a niche that provides more opportunities for sexual transmission. Quote, gay behavior could facilitate spread because of larger numbers of partners who are gay males may on average have a relative to, so basically they're arguing here in this study that's being cited here that the reason why gays have more partners than straight males or women or gay women is because parasites are using them to spread. I disagree with this. I think it's because they're males and males are just way sluttier and hornier. And if during my period when I wasn't the person I am today and was much more slutty, if women were as slutty as me, if the sex I was interested to was as slutty as me, I would have been having even more sex. So I think that that's what causes that. But it could be a partial thing here, right? This theory has received new support from a recent discovery that the gut microbiome is different in men who have sex with men. Specifically, there are fewer commensal bacteria that help repair and preserve the intestinal lining. Perhaps an invasive pathogen destroys them in order to facilitate its entry into the body. Although this change in gut microbiome seems to pave the way for HIV infection, having been in fact discovered through AIDS research, HIV itself does not seem to be responsible. There are 3 studies that show this. So, yikes. We know that the gut microbiome is different. Could it be something in the gut microbiome or some other thing that's within the microbiome of gay people that is in part leading to same-sex attraction? And then I think back to many of the studies or just anecdotal accounts I hear of gay people where they had, because I have many friends who are gay, they have some young experience that is gay early in their sexual sort of awakening. Think like Milo in his experience with that Catholic priest, right?
Okay.
And then he tried to recontextualize it as, no, it's okay, I was gay, he helped me sexually awaken. Could it be that he literally just infected him with a disease?
Caught the gayness.
There's a reason why nobody wants you talking about this stuff, right? Think about the Harvey Milk thing when he specifically, this could also be why you have this unusual preference for.
Wait, no, I don't know what Harvey Milk.
Harvey Milk, famous gay guy, terminal named after him. Sure. He famously had a preference for underage boys. Specifically, one of his partners was 16 when they started dating. And that's when he began to adopt the gay lifestyle. And then the Harvey Milk dumped him as soon as he, aged into legal sex age because he wasn't interested in a lot of men at that age. Got a new, 15, 16-year-old. And then the guy ended up unaliving himself. A reporter told Harvey Milk that he was planning to unalive himself. And Harvey Milk told him, well, then something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing here, tell him not to make a mess when he does.
Lord.
Genuinely, one of the most monstrous people in human history. I cannot believe that gays are mad that Trump changed one of our battleships was named after him? And Trump changed it. And a lot of the gay community was like freaking out. And it's
San Francisco International Airport nevertheless gave him a terminal. So when God closes up worship, he gives you a terminal.
Okay, cuckold fetish. Okay. Let's get into this.
Oh boy.
Other pathogens may be responsible for certain paraphilias, such as a cuckold fetish, where a male host abandons mate guarding and even feels pleasure at the prospects of being cuckolded. This
could explain something's got to, because we're so confused by this, right? Like it's one of the most popular fetishes, and yet it's so.
Okay, hold on. This is going to blow your mind because I wasn't aware of this.
Okay.
Remember I said that almost any fetish you see today, you see across history? Yeah. I mentioned you see fart fetishes, you see sadomasochism.
Yeah.
Not true of cuckolding. He notes here that cuckolding fetish was absent from Greco-Roman literature, which nonetheless attests to a wide range of alternative sexualities. The earliest references come from the 17th century England, particularly among English merchants, the class that would have caught it first if it had recently evolved somewhere.
Ooh la la. Ooh.
This likely evolved recently, whatever the parasite was that was causing this.
And now
The
it's
date
taking
in
us
the
over.
blue-
Yeah, because it's so you wouldn't evolve to have
I've
this.
also talked before. I'm like, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. The date and Malou point to an external source, most likely slaves imported through the trade from West Africa. Because the region's high polygyny rate, conditions were ideal for the evolution of the STD that can spread from one polygynous household to another by inhibiting or even inversing male sexual jealousy. Remember, we talked about sexual arousal pathways working through an inversion system of something
Oh,
that
yeah. So a disease, it would flip the sign.
Yes, see our video on how human sexuality actually works. It's one of our early ones. It's important to watch or read our book on that because you are being lied to about what the data says. Sexuality is like a study that basically stopped in the 80s because everyone was afraid of what the data said. And we go into the real data, and the books only sells for like $1 on Amazon. So give us a nice review because those Amazon reviews are really hard to get.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that the barriers to transmission were already low. On one hand, the head of a household was generally an older man who could not satisfy all his wives. On the other, the latter were often solicited by young single men, as inevitably happens in polygamous societies. Frost 2023. So he's showing here that actually you see this behavior in polygamous societies. It would make sense. It would really help spread a parasite or virus or bacteria or yeast, who knows?
Sure.
Note here, this point was made by anthropologist Pierre van de Beige, and we're quoting the anthropologist here, the temporary celibacy of young men in polygamous societies is rarely absolute. However, while it often postpones the establishment of a stable pair bond and the procreation of children, it often does not preclude dalliances with unmarried girls, adultery with younger wives of older men, or the rape or seduction of women conquered in warfare. Thus, what sometimes looks like temporary celibacy is in fact temporary promiscuity. And then he cites a study here. Polygamous households were thus vulnerable to any STD that could overcome the already low barriers to entry. Once this behavioral niche was colonized, selection favored those strains that could lower the barriers even more. And then merchants, particularly in like the slave trade or around the slave trade, or frequenting brothels that kept enslaved women from these cultures, would then catch this and spread this throughout society. And this is where modern cuckold fetish comes from. Literally a disease.
That's crazy. I mean, honestly, that's the best explanation I've had so far. Because otherwise,
no. And the reason why I buy this explanation so strongly is because one, there's not a lot of other good explanations. Two, he's right. As somebody who's actually studied historic literature, I haven't seen this from before the 17th century.
So you know what? Is because I've been trying to research an episode on this too. And also it shows up in other bits of episode research I've been doing. Like when I did the Johannesburg episode, right? And I was just looking at subreddits for Johannesburg. One of the big subreddits was
more cuckolding behavior.
Yeah, with swingers and just like people looking to share their wives. Also, when I was doing actual research on the cuckold episode that you encouraged me to start doing, a lot of military people are doing it. And I'm like, why is it that like it's catching on within these like more tightly knit, like geographically or logistically sub-communities? But there you go. I mean, it could be explained.
Yes, and more than that, why is it that, as I have seen, more sexually promiscuous men who you think would be able to capture more women, thus
yeah,
they seem to be more into it.
Yeah. Oh, crazy, right?
And what does this mean? The very last thing you should ever do is be a bull for a cuckold. Which by the way is bad.
What's
because
is the bull the one that, because that's good, because then you're going to end up into it, right?
Yes,
you're going to catch the disease.
It's literally a disease that's honey trapping you.
Wow.
And then it will make you the today bull, tomorrow be the
today's bull is tomorrow's cuck. This is crazy. This is crazy.
This is actually crazy. I am so glad that was all of the sex I had when I was younger. I can
with virgins.
I don't seem. Yeah, well, so that's what Simone mentioned there, and this was like my thing. I had a strong preference for virgins. I really find it quite gross knowing when a woman has slept with other people. So almost everyone not everyone. It was like a good quarter of the people I slept with were virgins, and then other than that, they'd only slept with like one other person or something, which is probably why I didn't catch these things.
Goodness.
Or at least in regards to what arouses me, it would appear that I did not catch these things.
I was reading, because I only read the beginning of this article and then had to get back to work. I was like, well, how do I test if you or I have toxoplasmosis? Like, how would we even know, you know?
We don't seem to show a lot of the behaviors that I would associate with it, but we could.
that I'm not very easygoing and you're not into BDSM. So between that.
Well, I mean, I would say the things that arouse me would fall into categories of BDSM.
Yeah, but no. BDSM is like, gotta get the gear. You're into dominance. You're not into BDSM.
Yeah, it's true.
BDSM is about procedures and rules and hierarchy and accessories, and you're so not into any of that.
Well, I don't. You
can't
so
handle
much.
it.
Anyway, to continue here, I'm skipping a bit because
The one thing you cannot handle is any talk about logistics or rules or steps.
I hate it. Anyway, to continue here, we're going from the in paragraphs here. Specifically, we can look for decoy surface molecules. Such decoys mimic the surface molecules by pathogens to enter a cell while not allowing them to enter. An example in humans is CEACAM3, which mimics the normal surface molecule for CEACAM1. It is fast evolving, apparently because it has been co-evolving with certain pathogens. The latter evolve it to avoid this surface molecule, while in turn evolves to bind the pathogen even more. And then he cites a study here. As such, decoys specifically produced by are such decoys specifically produced by our neural tissues. Evolutionary psychologist Marco de Gil is skeptical about the possibility that behavioral manipulating parasites have adapted to human bodies, notably because we have large complex brains with redundancy and because we are much larger than microbes and can thus invest more metabolically in countermeasures to fight them. I basically already said this is just silly. We are obviously susceptible to this stuff. On the other hand, he goes on to say, we have much longer gestation times than many other behavioral manipulating parasites currently known, i.e. we live much longer than something like a cat, and we know that they increase the amount they affect our behavior over time, which we seem to see across these parasites. The latter thus has a co-evolutionary advantage. It can outmaneuver our countermeasures faster than we can evolve new ones. Very true. Humans evolve very slowly. So even if we are large and evolved, we have our countermeasures can't update. And more important than that, we just probably haven't been exposed to this stuff for very long. He goes, our large complex brains often create more opportunities for manipulation. Then again, the very largeness of our brains works in our favors. We can create so much neural redundancy that the parasite has to pull too many switches in too many places to produce a substantial effect. But the thing is it the parasite doesn't care about pulling too many switches in too many places. This might be what's causing multiple sclerosis. It has decades to do this to you. It is living in your body, right? That's just comically wrong. And he says, finally, we have another advantage. We can fight invasive parasites through cultural rules and prohibitions. Rules against sexuality, promiscuity, and non-vaginal sex may reflect a vague awareness that the sex act can transmit not only through unwanted semen, but also free riders. And then he cites two studies here. And I note here, our guide, the Pragmatist Guide to Creating Religion or Crafting Religion, talks about this. It talks about how evolutionary pressures like this would have been an evolutionary pressures on the early evolution of religion may have affected what religions ultimately became. And the behavioral sets of these religions, fascinating. That the fact that we dropped these and we ended up creating these sort of nest beds of perhaps even immunocompromised pools, because diseases evolve much faster in immunocompromised pools. Here I'm talking about the early gay AIDS population here that was very promiscuous. We may have created the perfect test beds for these new types of behavioral manipulating parasites and diseases and viruses to evolve. And our scientists are basically not allowed to study them because, oh my God, if they did, wouldn't that be naughty if we found out that certain individuals' behavior was not an inborn preference, but a parasite. That polyamory may not even be a preference. It may be a parasite. The very fact that you may not care that your partner is sleeping with other people, which among our ancestors would have been a very bad thing for males, something external might have to be modifying you to make you have this very evolutionarily maladaptive preference. And I love it that progressives are the ones who don't believe in evolution. By the way, if you want more like this, check out Peter Frost's Substack.
Yeah.
Simone, thoughts?
Our sex ed for our kids has just changed a lot, which is crazy.
Changes everything. This is one of the most impactful things I have ever covered on this show.
This is why I love the Based Camp community. We get these amazing emails, just like, well, check this out, and then our minds get blown, and then we get to share it with other people.
It turns out
like
everything
it's
you ever thought you knew about human sexuality was wrong.
Seriously. Wow.
And there's a lot of evidence. Is the other thing for this?
Yeah. Oof. Yeah.
Like, to me, I don't even take this as a theory. I take it as confirmed, and I know why it's been covered up.
Well, and it's also just one of those things where it makes sense. You know, it would make sense. There's a means, a motive, an opportunity.
A means, a motive, and opportunity.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, guys, I would say
Stop
that
having sex, everyone. Stop. Everyone just hide.
It changes so many things. It changes sex ed for my kids. This would have been so much more effective on me as a kid. If somebody was like, if you have a lot of sex, a parasite will take over your body and
control your
use you
mind
for the rest of your life, and then eventually discard you.
It's invasion of the body snatchers. It's terrifying.
Yeah. There are literal body snatchers out there that are going to attempt to seduce you, steal yourself.
Like literally seduce you. Yeah. Ooh.
2, it changes my perspective of our enemies, that there might be actual biological actors out there, parasites, that are co-evolving with the urban monoculture, and the urban monoculture benefits from spreading the affection because, for example, say toxoplasmosis, it lowers people's awareness of threats, and a lower awareness of threats increases, and we've seen this in voting behavior, a willingness to vote Democrat.
Yeah.
And not seeing the obvious threats that we're importing into our country.
Yeah.
You know, the great, like grape gangs, they can hear about these and that these are actively being covered up, or have actual politicians just walk up and be like, yes, we want to replace X population or something like that. And no, here, I'm talking about like Zoro Mandani's actual election speech, right? Like, I'm not like we're talking about literally Hillary Clinton saying that's why we need large immigrant waves. See our video on is Hillary Clinton a great replacement theorist? That people's threat response isn't alerted to this shows that these two communities work hand in glove. And again, here, I'm not noting I have any allusions to this. I, of course, do not believe that there's any agenda around replacing people. I'm just saying it's weird that Zoran Mandani and Hillary Clinton think that. Like, I love you, Simone. Thank you, our fans, and great episode. Fascinating.
Yeah, we're grateful for this tip. Really good stuff. Everyone keep the good ideas coming.
Yes, and like and subscribe if this episode was cool for you.
Yes, please.
We'll continue to scour the web for the information you need to know.
All right. Right.
I was surprised that today's episode did so poorly.
I don't know. Sometimes the algo gods just don't like us.
It was the episode on Muslims not liking dogs, but I suspect, I actually don't know. It could be that YouTube was trying to it's like, oh, this episode is anti-Muslim.
I mean,
we need to suppress.
There's nothing exactly flattering that's in that episode. So,
well, they wouldn't do that for, well, okay. So by the way, did you watch more of that girl's videos who I sent you?
Yes. Just as we were about to start this, I was in the middle of her episode on some Animal Crossing thing. Yeah, I'm delighted.
Hold on. I'll just pull up her name now so I can tell her friends. Cause I do not know how I was never recommended her videos.
She's delightful. Wait, sorry.
I started watching them.
What's her name again? I was talking over you. What's her name again?
Frankie Faye. And she does I had heard of it before. I think the Bad Art Critic or something, but it is exactly up my alley. It's like weird online subculture anthropology without a lot of moralizing or bias.
Yeah. Just delight in the weirdness of the internet and humanity. That is what we want. It is what she serves. She is doing God's work.
That's what I'm here for. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
So recommendation of the day, Frankie Faye.
What did fans
And she has a ton of watches on her videos. It's not like
why wasn't I being recommended this? Why weren't you? Like Simone and I have the same
how can we know about Strange Aeons? And how can we know about what's the name of the clown girl?
I don't know. She puts like tons of clown music on.
She's Australian and she puts on clown makeup and talks about.
I like literally now that I've watched Frankie Faye, I like Frankie Faye better than Strange Aeons or Clown.
Stop!
Face Girl.
Don't come for Strange Aeons. She's wonderful.
No, the problem is Strange Aeons is better. She's better than Clown Face Girl. Clown Face Girl is good, but the problem is Clown Face Girl is way too urban monoculture cooked. Strange Aeons is like gay.
She goes into more detail than I want, or sometimes she just chooses things that aren't that interesting, not that salacious.
And by the way, the very best, but he just doesn't produce videos much in this category. If you want to go into it, is Down the Rabbit Hole.
Oh, Down the Rabbit Hole is great. But he also did that really, really long one on the hurdy-gurdy. Like, he doesn't always do internet stuff. He'll just do stuff on like, here's this random instrument that I'm obsessed with. But he did he did furries. He did fur cons,
yeah, he's
right?
done some furry ones.
Yeah, no, he's done a lot of internet stuff, but he's also done a lot of I mean, not that I didn't enjoy the hurdy-gurdy history, but I also didn't.
I didn't watch that one. Anyway.
I did in solidarity. You have to show your support. Give some views, Malcolm. Jeez.
Well, there's one small one that I want to recommend that did a great one on the Husband Hotel incident, but I'd have to find it again because I was so surprised when I watched it. I was like, this is as good as any of the others I watched, but it only had like 10,000 views.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. We should someday do a roundup of our favorite
YouTube
sources.
Literally every morning for her and me, it's like, hey, did you watch Asmongold this morning? Yeah,
it's always
Asmongold this morning. What
Asmongold gets me out of bed, man. Like that's the and you're like, I don't want to do the day. He is woken up by the smell of a rotting dead rat in his ceiling, and I'm woken up by his stream.
So many of our fans is the thing that they talk about when they're like dating or in a marriage, which is great,
Oh yeah, no, yeah, like that the thing that keeps otherwise isolated marital partnerships from going stale is consuming content and discussing. It's like what ongoing university classes are. I think it's what a lot of people miss about school is that you would read Plato's Republic and then you'd go discuss it in class. And now we get to do that, but with a whole bunch of internet nonsense instead. And class is just someone you actually really love instead of a bunch of really basic, uneducated young people. So it's great.
And how'd you get up there? Yeah, you did climb all the way up there. Do you know how to get down? Okay. Titan, you want some pretzels? Octavian, excited for school? You want to go in my car?
Yes.
Why?
I want to play in there.
You want to play, but the pretzels are right there. Okay.